and welcome to the Building Sciology Poddie, where we talk about better buildings to live and breathe in. My name is Jess Kismet, and today I am joined by Dr. Tim Law. Dr. Law is a building scientist and architectural forensic investigator with a unique gift for translating complex technical building science challenges into plain language and practical solutions. His career has spanned continents and disciplines, from designing buildings to reverse engineering why they fail. He's contributed to many key publications on condensation in residential buildings, thermal comfort in an energy-constrained world, and how changes to the National Construction Code are, or aren't, helping us build healthier homes. Tim is perhaps best known for his work on mould and moisture, where he regularly reminds us that mould is the symptom and not the cause. He's consulted across the country on building failures, taught at universities, worked with government bodies, and is widely respected for his forensic mindset and commitment to better building outcomes. Dr. Tim Law, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jess, for having me here, and thanks for doing this Sciology podcast. I think you're filling a very important gap where we need to break down these concepts for the layperson. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm having so much fun. And every person I talk to, I learn something new. And this conversation is going to be no exception. I know it. So let's start. Your professional journey through architecture, building science, mold condensation has been fascinating and thorough. So could you please give us a little bit of a background how you got here and what drew you to this intersection of construction and building science?
Yeah, I guess I've always been a very technical kind of person. So when I looked at design, I've always been looking at how it functions and also how it performs. Probably what got me disappointed along the way is that architecture increasingly became more about the aesthetic and less about its performance. But still, that didn't stop me. I found some really good mates at the University of Tasmania, and we had our fun together, geeking out. And we kind of laughed that we were a dying breed of architectural scientists. There was a time that this was actually a thing. Actually, it still is a thing, but there was a time of Zockley where he was looking at bioclimatic design. And so that's been some 3 decades ago, or actually 4 or 5 decades, actually, I correct myself. But it has fallen on hard times. So I do appreciate that people like yourself, Jess, you're keeping this at the forefront, that there is more to design. It is not just the aesthetics or the appearance. There is a technical component that goes along with it. And when we get things wrong, it can be very serious. So my interest in this really started soon after my PhD. My PhD was in the area of looking at thermal comfort in an energy-constrained world, and you certainly have done your research. But when I was doing my research, I mean, a lot of PhD candidates reach this point and we ask ourselves a really important question. So what? You know, it's like you reach that point of an existential crisis and you ask yourself, do I really need to existentialize my research because nobody's interested in it? Because what if I get thermal comfort wrong? What is the worst that happens? Well, you'll be uncomfortable. You won't be sick. You will be uncomfortable, but it's not going to be to the point you get hypothermia or hypothermia. You're not going to perturb your core temperature. You're just going to be uncomfortable. What if I get my energy constraints wrong? Well, then you pay a bit more for your bill. And in a country like Australia where we have that much natural resource, it's hardly an issue. But when I came across this issue that as we were making buildings more energy efficient, we were also creating this rather unwitting unintended consequence of making them less healthy, because in line with making them more energy efficient, we created a condensation problem. And lo and behold, Australia is not alone in this journey. There are countries 4 decades ahead of us that dealt with the energy crisis of the 1970s. Australia only implemented energy efficiency into National Construction Code for houses in 2003. So we were a fairly late comer at this. And it was only sometime in 2010 onwards that we went into NatHERS 6 stars. 6 stars was when we started to see the problem a lot more significantly. And we're repeating the same problems, the same signs that other countries had dealt with when they made buildings more energy efficient. They noticed a condensation problem. And with the condensation problem, they had a mold problem. And with the mold problem, there was a health problem. I don't think we are properly weighing out the issues quite clearly as we are looking at the issue of energy efficiency. If it comes along with the consequence of it being less healthy, we actually need to track this very carefully and have a very sophisticated, nuanced approach that allows us to move both in tandem or to have at least enough information to make the right decisions if we have to give up one in place of another.
I couldn't agree with you more. The health aspect of what we do is such a strong driver for me as well. And I know a lot of people who've come into the building biology side of this industry come at it from a health perspective as well. So they a lot of them have had mold illness, and they come at it from they have a personal reason to drive this. And when I started my building biology studies and found out about chronic inflammatory response syndrome, I could not believe I hadn't heard of it before. Why is this not more widely talked about? If the statistics say 25% of us are affected by mold illness or biotoxins in mold, how is that not more widely understood and talked about? I'd been in the
Yeah.
industry 10, 12 years before I even came across it.
Yeah, and something that you find particularly in the health space, rather unfortunately, a number of doctors that I've spoken to have a bit of a complex that what they don't know is not very important or doesn't exist. So when I was pushing for condensation research, one of my first port of calls was to speak to the medical researchers at I wouldn't name which university,
Mhm.
but the response I got was that they are not interested in syndrome theories. So
Yeah.
CIRS stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome.
Yeah.
And they looked at it and said that, oh no, you know what? This thing has got an evangelistic edge. And I'm just thinking, of course, I mean, if people finally have found something that explains a lot of things, surely they'd be quite enthusiastic about it.
Of course.
But no, mainstream medical researchers weren't interested in touching it. So yeah, I unfortunately I think the issue is that there is an establishment that you are working against by trying to raise this issue.
Mhm.
And in a sense, Richard Shoemaker, who coined the term CIRS, he has done a significant amount of research. um, it was his research that we were working on when we were successful in an NHMRC grant. That's a National Health Medical Research Council grant that came as a result of this biotoxin inquiry into this federal parliamentary inquiry into biotoxin illness. It was really at that point that we looked at his research a lot more thoroughly. And one of the things that we were unfortunately let down a little by was that I don't understand why Richie Shoemaker doesn't publish in the more reputable journals. Maybe they just wouldn't accept that. It's the same kind of gatekeeper mentality. So it has always pushed this condition to be at the fringes.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yes, by a long way of explaining it, I think you are swimming against the tide by dealing with this matter.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just keep swimming.
Good on you.
um, so, as you mentioned, we really struggle with improved energy efficiency, and then the knock on effect of unhealthy buildings, and so that intersection between energy efficiency, air tightness, and ventilation. So, this is a question I ask lots of people for their input on, and I'm going to ask you as well. How do you think we can strike the balance between air tightness and ventilation?
If the end goal is health, then it's going to be a very climate specific and material specific kind of an answer. So yes, if we are not in a particular rush, let's go through the various possibilities. uh, so let's go up north. If you're in a hot, humid kind of a climate, what you're dealing with is that the ambient conditions are such that you would be in a region where mold is likely to grow on moisture sensitive materials. If you avoid moisture sensitive materials, you're in a good place. But if you are building with plasterboard, gypsum plaster has got starch additives to allow it to bind and also to allow it to stick to the paper face. So you're dealing with starch and cellulose. Those those are basically pre-digested fiber, and for mold, that means that's going to be their favorite source of food once the humidity is correct. So in a hot, humid kind of a tropics, uh, ventilation does not help you if you're working with this kind of materials. If you're dealing with regular plasterboard, the buildings, without exception, would have to be air conditioned if you want to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And for air conditioning to work naturally, you are trying to cool the air, and therefore, the less air ingress we have, then the more stably we can control those temperatures.
The
So
less hot, humid air ingress, right?
correct, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is exactly what you're trying to condition. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
remove the moisture from the air.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, I would say that ventilation works against you in a hot, humid climate.
Natural ventilation?
Natural ventilation.
Natural ventilation, yes.
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
the ambient air is very humid.
Yes.
Now, if we go to the other extreme, let's say we go down south to Tasmania. Oh, you're in South Australia, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, this really cool climates during winter. The air has cooled to a point that it is really dry. The colder the air gets, the less moisture it can hold. So a lot of the air is already wrung out by forming dew on all the external surfaces. So that kind of air, if you were to bring it indoors, becomes a really dry air once you warm it up. So it's not going to be as much of a health problem as it is going to be an energy problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because and then once again depends on how you deal with the aim of achieving thermal comfort. The main technology we use is air conditioners and heat pumps. So what you're doing is that you are warming or cooling the air as a way of delivering comfort to people. The issue with that is, well, if you are dealing with warming air, then then air becomes a very valuable commodity. Each time we replace that with external ventilation, we've got to put in the effort to warm it up again. It's different if you use a different kind of method. Let's say if you were at a really old building and it was made of stone and you had a fireplace. You lit the fire would warm up all the surfaces, and then all the surfaces, after it's been warmed up, it becomes radiant heat.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got radiant heat, then ventilation doesn't make a difference. See, because the energy is coming to you by the radiation of the various surfaces. So yes, for the majority of the cases, it would also once again make sense if you were to try to make buildings more airtight. But now there's a bit of other problem. We don't balance the pressure in our buildings. Now, air flows where it is higher pressure to lower pressure. What we typically have in homes, for example, is that we have extraction. It could be the bathroom, it could be the cooking. We are extracting air.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as we extract air, we create a negative pressure zone within the house. And so it tries to pull in air from the outside to balance. So unless you have a very airtight space, it's going to be bringing in air in a way that is not controlled. Sometimes it is not an issue. Sometimes if the air path goes through areas which is prone to have condensation and mold, then you're bringing in moldy air into the space. So yeah, that creates a series of other problems as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And if you are in somewhere like say in Brisbane or Sydney, then you have a balance of kind of equally warm or cool weather, the same number of degree heating and degree cooling days. And you've got to deal with vapor flow now in two directions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not going to be always a straightforward solution. I think we actually need a very sophisticated way of monitoring the outdoor conditions in terms of its. If I were to take one measure, I'd say it's dew point. Let's measure just one parameter, the dew point of the outside, and decide if that dew point is correct to bring that air indoors. If it's okay to bring it indoors, then knock yourself out, ventilate the place. If it is not, then we've got to keep the inside inside and the outside outside.
So you're talking about the dew point of the outside. When you say measure the dew point, what do you mean? Where? Yep.
We typically when we were to measure the conditions of air, we'll measure things like the temperature and the humidity. Just with electronic sensors. Before we had electronic sensors, what we did was that we had this thing called a sling thermometer. It had two thermometers inside there, one and then you swing it around. So one bulb swings around dry, and the other one has got a wet wick on it. So the wet wick would cool the bulb, so you get two temperatures. One is called the dry
This is
bulb.
Wet bulb and dry bulb.
Exactly, that's where it comes from, dry bulb and wet bulb.
Yep.
So the wet bulb would typically read lower than the dry bulb because of the evaporative cooling effect. Unless, for example, you reach saturation point and the air cannot hold any more moisture, it doesn't evaporate. That is the only time where dry bulb and wet bulb will read the same temperature, and that is
Mm-hmm.
your dew point temperature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the dew point temperature is really the point at which uh, air at a certain temperature cannot hold any more moisture.
Yes. Yes. So when you say which you're measuring that outdoors or indoors. So a dew point happens on a surface, right?
Dew point, yes, that's the phenomenon of it condensing, but
Yes.
with the temperature, humidity, or dry bulb and wet bulb, we can look up what is the dew point temperature. That
Yeah.
means the
Yeah.
temperature at which air of that condition is going to condense.
Okay. So you would take the relative humidity and the temperature of outdoor air and determine the dew point of that air is this, therefore it should stay outside.
Yes, exactly. So
So
if the
the
dew
internal surfaces are likely to be this temperature, and therefore we don't want that air inside, so it has to stay outside. Is
exactly,
that what you're saying? Okay,
exactly.
understood. Yep.
Yep. And that's why it is very climate specific. It is
Mm,
material specific.
hmm
There's not going to be a straightforward solution.
hmm
Ventilation often helps, but it doesn't always help. I think that's
hmm
that's what I want to bring
That's what
across.
you're saying. Yep. And
Yeah,
it depends. It depends. Just like everything, it depends.
that's always the correct answer. It always starts with it depends.
Oh my goodness. Um, so up in Queensland, up in the hot, humid climates, we want to keep the hot, humid air outside. The vapor pressure is coming through the wall from outside to inside. In colder climates, it's more likely to be warmer and more humid inside, and we want to stop that. We want to ideally ventilate that. So you're saying ventilation in colder climates is probably more useful than it is in warmer climates?
If the issue is about managing condensation and mold, yes, it's going to be more useful in cool climates by virtue of cold air being dry.
Yes, yes. And in hot, humid climates, the better idea is to air condition and keep the air out.
Keep the air exactly.
Air condition to bring that internal temperature down to dry out the air.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And is there a level? There's this the question we all ask: is there a level, a blower door test score that you would say you need to ventilate this, or you need to, but based on that discussion, it depends. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everyone wants to know, particularly because I work in the southern states, and we do rely on ventilation, whether it's mechanical or manual. Here we do rely on external air coming in to reduce our mold risk. So at what point is there a point that you would say, or not?
Once again, I don't know whether measuring by air changes per hour at 50 pascals is the correct measure.
Hmm
Let me explain that.
hmm
I understand that for passive house, that is one of the criteria. You could get below 0.6 air change hours at 50 pascals. The average Australian house, in an earlier study, this was by CSRO by Michael Ambrose some years ago, not the latest one. When he did some years ago, I think we were looking at 10 to 14 air change hours, air
hmm
changes per hour. That is probably at a point that you don't need to do anything about it. So somewhere between 10 and 0.6, we've got to find that the magic
Yeah.
balancing point.
Yes.
The reason I don't think that it is the most uh, useful metric is because it also depends on how many other pollutants you are dealing with in a space. So one of the common measures that we are using these days is to measure carbon dioxide.
hmm
And that is an indicator of the air quality. It is not in itself an issue of air quality. Let me explain that. Many people would use, say, a criteria of, say, either 1,000 ppm or 1,000 above ambient as a criteria to determine whether it requires more fresh air makeup. But that's only using carbon dioxide as a proxy. Carbon dioxide at those levels is not in itself a pollutant. In submarines, when they're doing tests, they're looking at effects above 5,000 ppm.
Yeah.
before it becomes a health issue. So quite often we're using CO2 as a proxy, but as a proxy for what? The real issue, the most commonly known one would be particulate matter, or PM 2.5. 2.5 being the dimension of that particulate, 2.5 micrometers.
Size. Hmm.
So PM 2.5 would be one of them. PM10 is the other. The other one would be volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Those are the things that we actually should be measuring more directly. It's just that it is more complicated and more sophisticated to measure that we end up using CO2 as as a proxy for that. So back to the question, when do we need more makeup air? That depends on the number of occupants and which indoor air quality parameter we are looking at.
Hmm.
Now, if you were to wrangle my arm and come up with a number, I'd say anything below 5 would be something where you need to start looking at this quite seriously. Below 2, I'm pretty sure you're going to need some kind of makeup air.
Hmm. Hmm. And by
Yeah.
makeup air, you mean outdoor air coming in, for
Out,
those who
outdoor.
are not
Yeah.
engineer minded, because I did,
Yeah.
I had to clarify that one.
Yeah, that's a
Mm,
good point.
mm,
Yes. I do mean by that external fresh air.
hmm.
Although, with the rise of awareness of these issues, I think the new standards we're looking at, like for example, ASHRAE 241, we're no longer looking at external air as fresh air. We are
Yeah.
looking at equivalent clean air. So
Hmm.
it's a bit more nuanced.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, equivalent clean air deals with the particulate matter. It doesn't deal with the gaseous contaminants.
The
So
gaseous.
yeah, the
Okay.
gases. Yeah,
Oh, the
so
gas. Oh, the gas.
yeah,
Gaseous.
yeah,
Yep. Got it. Yep.
gaseous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So things like the volatile organic compounds, the odors, and so forth. It's not quite captured in the concept of equivalent clean air yet. So we're still trying to make these things up. For the bulk of Australia, outdoor air is clean. Except
Yes.
during a bushfire, except when your
Yeah.
neighbors are putting out wood fire smoke, or in doing a massive barbecue or something like that. But generally, outdoor air is generally clean.
Generally clean. Yep. Yep. Okay. All right. I think we covered that sufficiently. I think. All right. Let's go to the next question. Um, in your work, you are known to say that mold is a symptom, not the cause. So, could you please explain what you mean by that and what people are getting wrong when tackling mold issues?
Yeah, that's right. This is a nice big loaded question. So let's see where I can start from to break down all this academic gristle.
Hmm.
Um, with Now, mold is a problem in itself, but it is not the only problem. Um, Mold is a really good indicator because it is quite visible, and um, it starts germinating and growing before the other microbes that demand more water. So the metric that we
Starts
use,
germinating before the other microbes that demand more water.
yeah.
Okay.
So let me explain that.
Mhm.
When we're looking at the amount of water vapor air can hold, we use the term relative humidity. The similar concept is also applied to materials and foods. We call it water activity. That's all right.
Excuse me.
Yep. So under thermal equilibrium, let's say a material is the same temperature as the air, and the air is at 60% RH, the water activity, I'll say that plasterboard is going to be 0.6, a water activity of 0.6. At 0.6, some of the dry molds begin to germinate. At 0.8, the quite a number of them will be able to germinate, but there are some colonizers, or we call them tertiary colonizers, that require the water activity to be quite high, above 0.95, for example, before they start germinating. But those are the molds. And then we've got a bacteria, which is another class of another kingdom in its own. Now, the the bacteria, especially those that are found in water damaged buildings, tend to be really sophisticated, and they create a host of problems more advanced than mold. So a class of bacteria called actinomycetes is one that Richard Shoemaker has been looking a lot in, but they require a very high water activity. So where mold is useful as an indicator is that the dry molds, the primary colonizers, give us that early warning before the building gets wetter and wetter, and then the tertiary colonizers come. And the tertiary colonizers are usually the nastier molds. You look at the primary colonizers as those that come in quickly and they breed like rabbits and they start colonizing the space. And
Like
the
the
later,
Aspergillus, Penicillium, that
yes,
one? Yep.
yes, yeah.
Hmm.
They cross a few different, but yes, they definitely have the tertiary, the primary colonizers amongst Aspergillus and Penicillium. But the tertiary colonizer like Itomium, like Eulocladium, Stachybotrys,
Yes.
they come later. But by that time, there are already colonies established. So their tactic is quite different. They are like like a colonist coming to a place that already has got an indigenous population. They
Hmm.
bring in the big guns, all right? So
Yeah.
and the big guns for them are their mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are basically the way the mold produces a toxin to give it a competitive advantage. The biological term is called allelopathy. It's a bit like how the she oak would drop down those needles, and basically nothing else can grow on the ground after that. Similarly, that's what the tertiary colonizers do. They'll pump out these mycotoxins that basically wipe out the early colonizers, and we are the ones that suffer from those too. So
So what was that word again?
allelopathy.
Okay.
Yep. So it's just basically how it's a chemical warfare of plants to give themselves a biological advantage by making it hostile to other organisms.
So you
So
can tell how long the mold has been present based on what type of mold is present? Is that
we
what
can
you're saying?
the timing is indirect. The most direct indicator is the water activity. We can tell how wet the material is by looking at the kind of uh, organisms that are found there. Usually, we can measure the moisture content of materials quite directly. But let's say a flood has come through, it's dried up, the materials are dry. Well, if you're really curious to find out how wet it was before, the type of organisms that grow there would be a good indicator. And the people that spend a lot of time in this are actually the food researchers. They work on the water activity of food. So by for example increasing the salt content or the sugar content, you drop the water activity. So you make it such that certain organisms will not grow. So the people who are right at the cutting edge of looking at how water activity affects microorganisms would be the food scientists. The
Right.
environmental scientists, we draw our knowledge from the people doing the original research.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's a part where mold is an indicator, especially the primary colonizers are an early indicator of a moisture damage, and the moisture damage is the real problem that we have to deal with.
Hmm.
Very often we cannot see the moisture damage, but the mold becomes the indicator for it. And then probably another point that might be useful for your listeners to understand is that we don't really need, in the case of say plasterboard, to wait for spores to land on the plasterboard before the mold will grow under a high humidity condition. What happens is that plasterboard, the pulp in the factory is typically already pre-contaminated with mold because the pulp factory would be actually producing pulp continuously. So the machines are already full of mold. It's already pre-inoculated into the mold. And that's why we can find moldy plasterboard even when it is concealed underneath wallpaper, vinyl wallpaper, for example. Yeah. So you don't really need spores to land on it. And
Is
coming
that
together,
because of the moisture content um in the machinery? Is
it,
it
it, will-
it grows because it's wet?
it will be in the
Is that
factory,
right?
yes. So
Yeah.
the purpose of mold is really to recycle nutrients. So in a forest, that's what the fungi do. They break down carbon-based uh, materials such as trees and stuff, and they break it down into humus, and that becomes soil, and that allows new plants to grow. No mold, no soil, no food. They are part. They're a vital part of the ecosystem. It's just that we don't want them to be overly active inside our buildings.
Okay, so by using plasterboard straight up, we're already pushing stuff uphill.
that's that's a good way of saying it. Yes, we are because in the wild, they would take a lot of effort to break down these nutrients. In trees, for example, even if they're after only the cellulose, they've got to wait for other fungi that would break down the harder to break down bits, the lignans, the hemicellulose. So those are the structural parts of timber. So only when those are broken down can the cellulose be released. But in the pulp factory, if you're doing things with things like MDF, medium density fiber boards, that's found in kitchen carpentry, is found in IKEA furnitures, and all these things. We are already pre-digesting the fibers, and it doesn't take much effort for the mold to grow. So it's really easy for them to take off after that.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. I feel like I'm already already learning so much. But it is the going down into this level of knowledge is really, really interesting. It's time for a quick sponsor shout out. Today's episode of the Building Sciology Poddie is proudly brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Enduro Builders and Climasure. A huge thank you to these incredible businesses for supporting the podcast and helping us spread the word about better buildings to live and breathe in. Your support makes this podcast possible. Please head over to their websites and follow their social pages. I appreciate it. I need to regroup my brain. The second part of that question is what people are getting wrong when tackling mold issues. What do you think people are getting wrong when we are trying to tackle mold issues in our homes? If we're using a lot of mold sensitive, porous materials like plasterboard, like MDF, what are we getting wrong to keep these building materials healthy? Because they do have mold in them already, as you're saying. So we need mold to break them down to create these products. So in order to stop that from germinating, what do we need to do?
Okay. Like you said, we are pushing uphill if we are working with a moisture sensitive material that is so sensitive to mold growth.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are quite a lot of things we are getting wrong, and I might just talk about where we have created a problem as a result of our siloed thinking. I think building practitioners, when we work at buildings, we deliver the building, and we don't typically go back there to check on the occupants if they are breathing easy and that the house is performing as we promised and so forth. There are no defects, and we don't typically do that. But when something catastrophic happens, say a flood or hail damage, and then an insurance claim is lodged, what happens is that another industry comes into the picture, and that is the restoration industry. So I've had the opportunity of being in the construction side, and now in the restoration side of it, I see a very different side. I see that when you come in restoration, it is important for the insurer to know, for example, whether the mold is a result of the claim event, or was it pre-existing and unrelated? It could be a building fault, a defect. It could be just a code-compliant building that didn't take care of condensation. They need to know because on one hand it is covered, on the other hand it isn't.
Yes.
Now, some of the problems that we are facing are those that we cannot find an elegant solution to. In fact, we have no solution. One of those that I see quite often is with fire-rated plasterboard. So what happens is that if you were to build two houses against each other, we require fire separation between them. What we call two sole occupancy units, you need to have a fire-rated wall with a certain FRL. The cheapest way of doing that wall, obviously, is with plasterboard. Plasterboard is a fantastic fire-rated material because it's got the gypsum has got this thing called the water of crystallization. So when you heat it up, it will release that water of crystallization. That allows it to stay insulated and prevent the spread of fire for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with plasterboard is that we line them with paper. And this wall between the two houses has got to be built before the roof is on.
Mm-hmm.
So we leave this plasterboard in the rain
to get wet.
Yes. So by the time we open the wall to look at flood damage, we're looking at areas that were not affected by the escape of liquids. there's mold on it. Now, the restoration industry works to a certain standard. It's written by the American organization called the IICRC, Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. And they've got standards for that S500 for water damage restoration and S520 for mold remediation. Um, the guidelines is that if there's mold on the plasterboards, you remove the plasterboards. Now, how do you remove a plasterboard that was installed between two walls during construction? Now, in some cases, you can remove and try to fill it up, but in some products, it's this product called shaft liner, where you got to put it between a metal channel. You can't slot it in anymore after the walls have been built. So you're stuck with this condition, and we've got a clash. We've got a clash between what the construction industry is doing and what the restoration industry is doing. And who's caught in the middle is the building owners. We are not talking to each other.
Building owners.
We are not talking to each other enough, because, and I think if we put ourselves in the position of the building owners, we might rethink the whole construction. We'll be asking ourselves, was it really worthwhile going with the cheapest fire separating wall? We could have built it with, say, a tilt panel or with masonry work. It's going to cost more, but hey, that wouldn't get damaged if we had inclement weather. So I think that the root cause of a lot of the problems I feel we're encountering is siloed thinking. Everyone is working within their narrow silos and saying that, all right, this works for me, it's somebody else's problem. And I think mold is one of those hot potatoes that nobody wants to deal with. It's always somebody else's problem. I think I've summarized it in a line as somebody's problem, nobody's business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what we need is more generalists who can sit across the different disciplines and understand that you can't solve the problems created upstream. We really got to move as far upstream as possible, possibly to the designers, to get these things done right, so that we don't have to try to be on our back foot trying to solve problems that were kind of designed in and built in.
So get it right from the start.
Yep.
Get it right the first time.
Yes.
And ask questions, collaborate, communicate, put a team together, work together. But the problem with that is knowing who to talk to, and having the time and the inclination and understanding that it's a thing you need to know about. And
that's one thing. And I might ask you a question, because you've done so many interviews. Do you have a sense that Australians have a fear of science?
A fear, yeah, not a fear. I guess it's fear of the unknown, and there's just barriers. There is mental barriers in too hard basket. Let's just do what today needs.
Yeah, we've got to make science popular and appealing.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Good on you. Yeah, because I think some of the phobias have set in, and people just don't want to touch condensation because it is too sciencey, and that's really unfortunate. We do need some science to understand and grapple with the issues.
Of course.
But it is not too difficult, I feel.
Yeah. It's not, and I think just the old Coke can analogy, it's moisture, it's there, it's heat, air, and moisture is everywhere, and we really must understand it in order to make sure that these unintended consequences don't happen. It is a lot. I think it's a lot simpler than than the general population understand.
Yeah. We've got to get you a slot in some popular TV drama so that people can learn by some kind of diffusion without having to feel like they had to work so hard to understand it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We don't have to get a PhD to understand this stuff.
No, you don't.
Honestly.
No. Yeah. Just wrangle the arms of the people with PhDs to explain it in a way that you can understand.
Yeah, exactly. And have conversations. Be open to conversations and be willing to learn. And then you get there eventually. And once you start, you can't unstart. You can't unlearn. And so once you start, you're on the way.
Yeah. That's a beautiful point.
Okay. Tim, you have been quite vocal about gaps in our building code when it comes to condensation and ventilation. So What do you think? What do you think is a simple fix or a not simple fix? What do you think is the fix that we need to address it?
Yeah. Um, I like how in all your questions you're asking for a solution. I'm usually not quite there. I can see the problem, but not the solution. But let me explain the problem first. Yeah. I think many building practitioners would find themselves in the position where all they're aiming for is to achieve code compliance. I think with my experience of condensation, I'm looking at where the code needs to be. So I'm looking at it from a different point of view. I'm looking at what makes the code fit for purpose. Whereas most practitioners aren't really interested in that. They're asking the question, how can I get this ticked off? How can I build? How can I move on to my next project? Um, so I think what I'm requesting is that people who are thinking that way understand that we are not where we need to be. Every 3 years, when we update the code, there are more provisions, not to make people's lives more difficult. When we first did our condensation scoping study for the ABCB, that was in 2016, we came up with a list of recommendations and how they could be rolled out into the code for the next 4 or 5
Hmm.
iterations.
Hmm.
Australia is probably about 4 or 5 decades behind where the cutting edge of condensation, hydrothermal analysis, and research in this field is. Not because we don't have the problems, it's just that we have been late at this, and I feel a lot more needs to be done. So where we are for this current iteration for NCC 2025, whenever that's going to be rolled out, and beyond, we are still very far from where we have needed to be from the very beginning of our energy efficiency provisions. Um, so I come from that point of view that code compliance is not nearly enough. We need to ask the question, is it fit for purpose? But that's a really complex question because fitness for purpose is not something that the NCC claims to accomplish. In fact, it explicitly disclaims fitness for purpose under its disclaimer. Um, so we are stuck in this kind of a no man's land that being code compliant doesn't mean fit for purpose. And in a nutshell, that's probably my main criticism that
Hmm.
uh, we need to not look at the NCC as the maximum. We need to look at it as a pathway to us accomplishing the real changes that we need. So it's nowhere close to where we need to be. You can have a code compliant home and you can have people sick there. And
Hmm.
then we have to ask our questions. Is our built environment failing these people? These people with CRS, they can be up to 25% of the population. Um, uh, we make public buildings universally accessible for the 1 or 2% that require mobility aids. But that's no harm, isn't it? It benefits everyone else.
Hmm.
A mother pushing a pram, an old person, they may not require mobility aids, but ramps, tactile indicators, it helps everybody.
Hmm.
We can make buildings universally accessible. Why aren't we asking the question whether our buildings are universally healthy? We aren't asking that question, and we ought to be asking that question. Because if our buildings are not universally healthy, if the air is unsuitable for somebody with cystic fibrosis or a compromised immune system to breathe, then then what are we accomplishing? I mean, surely we need to make buildings robust enough for everyone to enjoy.
Hmm.
And that's my pitch. I think
Hmm.
we are a long way away from that. We need to start grappling with health issues and see the interplay between health issues and the built environment. Doctors have got to be a lot more cognizant about how buildings are the theater of a whole lot of ailments, of which they are treating the symptoms. Building practitioners have got to be a whole lot more conversant about what makes buildings healthy or unhealthy. I think that's where we need to be. We are a long way off from there.
Hmm.
Part of the problem is the very fragmented regulatory system across Australia. If you were to ask the question, who is responsible for a healthy building? Well, once again, it depends. Your universal answer it comes to play here. I haven't studied every state, but for example, in Tasmania, it is not the building surveyor; it's the environmental health officer who makes that call. through the instrument called the Public Health Act under the clause of unhealthy premises. If you come to Victoria, where I'm based, the environmental health officer doesn't make that call. It is the building surveyor who can give an opinion and issue a building notice if he's of the opinion that the building is unhealthy, is a risk to the health of anyone using the building. So if you go to every state, it's going to be a different legislative instrument. But hey, it is never really one person's responsibility. Are we back to the issue of it being somebody's problem and nobody's business all over again? We've got to see that this is a communal problem. This is a problem that affects everyone. It's going to be somebody we know that is going to be in that category of being sensitive to mold in buildings, whether they've got asthma, whether they've got cancer, whether they've got an organ transplant and required to be on immunosuppressant drugs. We would know somebody who is in that category. Are we saying that our built environment is not for them? And I cannot accept that as the acceptable answer. So that there is so much work we need to do. It is not just the NCC. The NCC, it's constrained. At the end of the day, it's got to be all of us doing way more than the minimum standards.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with awareness. It starts with the age of podcasts like yours, where we have this kind of long format discussions to start unpicking how complex these issues. And I think we are in an environment where people are actually open to such long format discussions. I mean, why is Joe Rogan's 2-hour interviews one of the most popular podcasts on Spotify? Why are people like Tucker Carlson that talks for an hour and a half with one person? Why are they popular?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I think increasingly people want to have a sophisticated, in-depth discussion. They're sick and tired of platitudes, of having soundbite information, because it's never that straightforward. We need to unpick these complex problems with a lot more time. And I think we're at a cusp, and probably that's where I see hope in this. I'm encouraged that people like you are picking this up. I mean, I've been following your work, but not everybody knows about you. But hey, if you become popular, isn't that a great thing for everyone? That this could mean that everyone's knowledge becomes that bit more sophisticated. Everybody's IQ goes up by a few points through this podcast. Isn't that a fantastic thing?
Oh, gee, Tim, I hope so. I really hope so. I want to connect the dots for people. I want to increase knowledge bases, and I want to get conversations happening. So I really hope that is happening out there. And I think that what you're saying about long form discussions, I think that anyone who is willing to sit down and listen to this conversation or any longer conversation has got to be a solution orientated person. And one of my favorite podcasts, the Mark Manson podcast, is not building science related, but he's sort of like it's more like psychology, people related. He's just started a podcast where they're 4-hour long episodes, and I have committed to listening to 4 hours of this guy talk. But he's brilliant.
It goes by quickly when you're traveling and listening to them wander around. It's
all the light bulbs. You're like, yeah. And it's helpful. So I hope that's what people are getting out of these discussions that we're having. So thank you. Okay. I would like to know a little bit about, you are in the restoration industry. So RIC, what is that? Your company that you work for is RIC. What does that stand for?
Restoration, insurance, and construction. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So yep.
So the bulk of our business deals with looking at restoration works from after an event. So it could be a lot of insurance related events would be like floods, fires, methamphetamine, and so forth. So
meth
basically,
labs.
Yes, clandestine meth labs.
Wow.
It's a lot of what we do is around mold and moisture. But yes, we
also drugs.
we look at those cook houses for meth labs. Yes, fire damage and a number of other things as well. Yeah.
That's an area of the world that I know nothing about. And it'd be fascinating to. I mean, I watched what's that series with the on Netflix? Did you watch it where they cooked meth?
Not sure. No, I haven't watched that one, but yeah. A lot of those things are probably more fact than fiction.
Yeah, yeah. It felt it. It felt it. I forgot the name of it. I'll have to look it up. Anyway, great series. Loved it. So I would like to know, could you share with us some of the building failures that you have investigated? Is there any in particular that really stuck with you that you tell people about, like a, lessons learned type thing?
Yep. Uh, if you want a fairly balanced and reasonably comprehensive a treatise of it, I've done 2 reports for the Victoria Building Authority
Uh-huh.
on 2 data sets. One was based off the Victoria Managed Insurance Authority's domestic building insurance claims, and the other one was with the Domestic Building Dispute Resolution Victoria, DBDRV's dispute database. Both of them were looking at mold and moisture issues as a result of, it could be building defects, faults, disputes. So it's quite thoroughly dealt with there. On my own, those that I see quite often would be a fair bit of plumbing failures. It could be the roof plumbing. Another one that we often find a lack of is in site drainage. So, for example, you got a sloping site. Uh, the code actually requires that you shouldn't have a negative fall. You should fall away from the house. But if you've got a sloping site, most of the time people don't bother about that, and you end up with a wall that is constantly being accumulating moisture. Lack of site drainage, there should have been a cut-off drain there and so forth. Another one that we see very often is materials that have been left out in the weather, so that by the time you sheet up, the mold is already kind of actively growing. It might get dormant for a while, but you're already on the back foot. Um, yeah. Balconies, waterproofing issues, it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
Even internal waterproofing, we had in the last iteration of the National Construction Code, a newly referenced AS3740 for internal waterproofing. There have been a lot of changes, and it tells you that we needed those changes because we were doing things less than satisfactorily.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of a wall do you have to waterproof before then? You just worried about waterproofing the junctions. Now you waterproof the whole wall. Now, so that tells you something that we've been building it wrong for a while. Yeah, so I think it is a constantly changing. Our knowledge in these areas is growing. That's whilst I don't want to pin blame on anybody, we do have to remember that it is seldom the building practitioners that wear the consequences of our actions. Uh, if somebody's house gets moldy, it's not us, it's not our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Our properties don't devalue in price. It's
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. So actually, it is really the homeowners that suffer for a lot of the decisions that we make. And probably my appeal would be that building practitioners start thinking about these things differently and not just look at the client as somebody who pays for the job and you move on, but look at that as a community we are somehow invested in one another, and we do have to take a certain measure of pride in what we are doing. It may be that we have to do things more slowly. It may be that we have to charge more. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Because the way we are doing things now is it's not viable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the VBA. Do you have any comment on any of those issues that happened in Victoria and the I understand that the VBA was dismantled last year and recreated into the Victorian Building and Plumbing Authority. Is that correct?
Building and Plumbing Commission,
Building and Plumbing
not
Commission.
not yet. It'll be in the second half of this year that happens.
That happens.
The law for that was just the bill for that was just passed into law a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So yeah, it hasn't quite happened yet.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm just going to interrupt our conversation quickly to let you know that this conversation was actually recorded back in June of this year, 2025, and the Building and Plumbing Commission was enacted in July 2025. So we were chatting before the Building and Plumbing Commission had been enacted. Back to our conversation. And do you have any comment on what happened there? And because I know you were involved in a few things that in that.
Yeah.
Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. I probably have too many comments on that. So many comments that I wrote a book about it. uh,
Is that
um,
is that the Uncle Dodgy book?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We'll
The
get to Uncle
defect,
Dodgy in a second.
yeah, it's called a defect evasion playbook.
Mm,
But it was my way of consolidating all my thoughts on this.
hmm
I've had a good working relationship with the VBA, primarily with the research division.
hmm And
Um,
just to interrupt you for a second, the VBA, for anyone who doesn't know what that is the Victorian Building Authority.
Yep, correct. Yep. Thanks for that. That's the building regulator for in Victoria. Um, they have very unfortunately been given the name of authority because I think it is the only building regulator that's called the building authority amongst all Australian states. Um, it is somewhat misleading because they don't set their own laws. Their role is a building regulator, and if you understand that, the regulator's role is in licensing, and in enforcing that the licensees do the right thing or they will be penalized or lose their licenses. And along the way, part of the strategy is to take an educative response to matters. So I've been working a lot with the people that are involved in the educational part of it, and I see that side of it, and I do enjoy it. I know there are people who have grouses against the regulatory part of it, where they feel that they've either overstepped or they are not doing enough. It's
hmm
hard to get it right. Um, my my take on this is that there are definitely issues with the way the VBA has been run. Um, Bronwyn Weir, construction lawyer, who co-authored the Building Confidence Report. Last year, she wrote a rather scathing report revealing the shortcomings of the
hmm
VBA. That the report has been uh, addressed. Anna Cronin, the current CEO, made an apology for how things have been done. So I don't want to be overly harsh on the VBA, seeing that they are aware of the issues and they're trying to make some changes. Um, so the new Building Plumbing Commission that you talked about, that's going to come in probably in July this year. It is the VBA with additional departments added to them. They'll be adding
Okay.
in domestic building insurance from the VMIA and also dispute resolution from the DBDRV. So
hmm
it becomes the one-stop shop for consumers.
For consumers in terms of defect rectification.
It's big. It's going to include defects. It's going to include non-compliance. It's going to include things like a major defect is going to be something where it affects habitability. Habitability obviously is going to be determined by things like safety and health. How they
hmm
determine health, I don't think they've quite thought through that yet. But on the most trivial end, it's going to include incomplete work. Now, what is incomplete work? It could be the painting on my wall is stuffed. It's one coat. I should have two coats. I mean, now the building surveyor doesn't care about these things. These things in the past would be pursued through the Domestic Building Contracts Act. And if the builder refuses to come back, you would have to basically get a court order. But why would you get a court order over a trivial matter like paint? I mean, waiting for that, you might as well just do it yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
But now the Building Plumbing Commission is going to be involved in all those things. How are they going to manage that?
It's a big job.
It's a big job because they're moving away from an insurer of last resort to the insurer of first resort. Now, first resort insurance is no different from a warranty. Now, the new Building Plumbing Commission is going to be the one that warrants all jobs. So how they're going to manage that, I'm not sure. I know there are good people in the VBA, but I feel that they have been let down by the politicians. I think the politicians are basically handballing the problem and saying that, look, we have created all these wonderful new provisions for increased consumer protection. But but the amount of workload it's going to generate for the new BPC, I think it's going to be crushing. I hope
Okay.
I'm wrong. I hope somebody saw these things through, but they typically don't.
It does seem like that. It does seem like a wonderful solution to a really big problem, but is it realistic? Is it going to serve every person who comes to them equally?
Mm.
And are they going to get the outcomes that they are intending to get? Because as you said, it is an astronomical amount of work and responsibility. So I guess just to summarize what's happened, and I'm going to probably stuff this up, so please correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but for the listener, the Victorian Building Authority has been dismantled and the Building and Plumbing Commission has been put together in its place because there were some significant issues with the way the VBA was being run, and the power that the homeowners had was very limited when it came to defects. And so this new Building and Plumbing Commission has been created in order to give a lot more power back to the consumer in Victoria. Is that a decent summary?
That's well put. The timing is slightly off. The VBA has not been dismantled yet, but you're off. You're ahead of your time. The rest of the explanations are spot on.
Yeah.
The Bioprotections Bill, now a law, was meant primarily for consumer protection, and that was going to be by giving the BPC more regulatory power, harsher penalties, and previously unknown power. This is a new power that they have called a rectification order, where they can order works up to 10 years after handover.
10 years. So builders in Victoria, be aware that this is now happening.
Yep.
And is that the most powerful body in Australia in terms of state by state regulation?
No. Sorry for being a nitpicker, but the word powerful would actually have I would need to be precise about that. Being all powerful also means that you're all responsible. So I think in the book I call this chapter the axe with a treacherous handle, because every time you try to swing that axe, there are splinters that hurts your hand. You see, what happens is that, if I could take, for example, in New South Wales, the situation is that the building commissioner has got powers to like prohibition orders, rectification orders, stop works notice. The way they do it is that they issue that order, they step out of the picture, the builder has got to solve it. Now, the Building Plumbing Commission is not quite the same. When they issue a rectification order, what if the builder decides that, hey, I'm not doing this too much work, I'm just going to go insolvent? Now you've got a rectification order with nobody to act upon it. What good is it? It becomes, the BPC becomes on the hook now, because they're also the insurer, to have to come up with a solution. And that's because the Insurance Act actually requires that the insurer steps in to fix the problem. As an insurer, now they've got to fix the problem that they have demanded to be fixed. Let's say another builder comes along and says, fine, I'm happy to do it, tell me what to do. Now, the BPC becomes the project manager as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And now if you come across a complex thing, like condensation, the builder says, don't know what to do, tell me what to do. Now, the BPC cannot say they don't know what to do, because the highest authority in the land, in Victoria, is the state building surveyor. He's got all the powers of the municipal building surveyors, which have all the powers of the private building surveyors plus more. So he is a technical expert on building and plumbing matters. He cannot say he doesn't know. So here we have a situation that whenever the BPC is going to swing the axe, it's going to hurt itself. Because they are
biting off its nose to spite its face.
They're going to be on the hook if the solution fails for round 2 and round 3 and round 4. Because a lot of these things, we don't even have the solutions yet. We don't even have the science yet. I don't know how to fix some of these issues. And yeah, so we are in a very, very tricky and complex situation. I'm afraid that the politicians haven't thought this one through when they roll this up. So you have.
Are we surprised?
Yeah. So we have. Yeah, you're right in the sense they are the most powerful, but they are also on the hook for that. Every time they swing the axe, their insurance is going to have to pay for it.
So do you think this has created more problems than it's fixed?
I think it'll create a new set of problems that we haven't created before. Problems that we could kind of push off and leave the homeowners to have to live with it. Now everything is transferred to the BPC. Yeah. So I think we have accomplished the goal of having better consumer protection.
So lots of promises.
Lots of promises by the politicians.
Yep.
I,
And let's see
I
how we deliver.
Yes, and I think the politicians have handballed the thing to the
Quite
BPC,
neatly.
and now the BPC has got to deal with the pile-on.
Okay. And who's employing people at the BPC? Who decides? Have they rang you and say, "Hey Tim, you want a job?"
Not quite. No. But I look at some of the jobs that they have. One is I think it's called Director for Enabling. So I don't know what these jobs are supposed to be, but they're
Who's
paying
writing the job descriptions?
yeah, but they're paying like a
Goodness.
couple of hundred grand. So
Mm.
it's well paid positions. Um yeah, I hope they get the right people. I would know most of the technical people, and I don't think they're getting them.
Right. So we watch and wait and see what happens. Maybe we'll have another chat in a year's time and see where things are at.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
So Uncle Dodgy. Let's talk about your book. This is Dr. Tim Law, aka Uncle Dodgy. So
Well,
the defect evasion playbook. What is it? Tell us about it,
yeah,
please.
it was a big thing, this bioprotections bill that was going to be implemented, the new BPC, the rectification orders, insurance of first resort. I was trying to wrap my mind around it, and I usually can't do that without writing. So
Mhm.
writing helps me to clarify my thoughts. So it was really a thought experiment. I wanted to deal with it, but I wanted to deal with it in a way that was a bit more playful, because if I wrote an academic piece, it would probably be read by nobody and it would affect no one. But if I could write it in a humorous way, well, it might be read by some people, but really it would also allow the criticisms to land with a softer touch.
Mhm.
So I wanted to show how bad the situation was and how many ways you could, well, pardon the pun, skin the cat. I know you got a cat, but
Don't listen, Max.
how many ways you could torment a homeowner by basically finding a whole lot of evasive measures. So that was the first part of the book. I wanted to explain that we have a terrible situation in Victoria, where the builders can play a whole lot of games with the homeowners, and homeowners have got no recourse to that. Before I introduce the bill, and before I introduce my criticisms on the bill, so that was really it. How can I give the worst players in industry something of a smug voice, and that voice became dodgy. And this was really inspired by C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, where you
Uh-huh.
got a senior demon writing to a junior demon about how you can go about tempting humans. Here was a dodgy builder. I called him Dodgy Builder, uh, writing letters to his nephew called Shonky. So he basically explains the playbook and the ways you can go about it. It wasn't really meant to be a real playbook. It was kind of an inverted advocacy. I
Satire. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to show how weak the system was and
Yeah.
how we need to advocate for more change.
Yeah.
So that was the real idea behind it. That became Dodgy Builder.
Yeah. Yeah. I have sorry, Dodgy Builder, not Uncle Dodgy, or is it Uncle Dodgy?
You
Do
can
they
call
get?
him Uncle Dodgy too. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. I have had a quick look through it. I haven't managed to read through it thoroughly, but I have had a quick look. It's very funny. It's very readable, and all based on true stories.
Yes,
It's all, isn't it? It's all factual,
it's all factual.
but
Yeah, but if
but
anyone is
translated
curious,
into something.
exactly. If
Yeah.
anyone is curious about the actual backstory, I can give you the exact court references and so forth. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I am going to put the link to the defect evasion playbook in the show notes. So yeah, have a read and have a giggle, and try not to get too depressed about the state of some of these buildings.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
learn from it as well. Learn from it and talk about it. Have conversations. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
You work in the space of forensic science. So you go in, you're in the insurance space. So you'll go into a building and you will forensically investigate and determine causes and effect. Um, As we deal with climate shifts and extreme weather and tighter buildings, how do you see the role of forensic science in the construction industry evolving?
I think we should deal with it in its holistic, complex way.
Uh-huh.
Um, when we're looking at forensics, we are trying to use science to determine what happened without us having witnessed what happened. So it's not science in the strict sense. Science is something that can be observed and repeated. Here we're making a number of assumptions. In the case of legal and insurance matters, it's accepted for us to say that on the balance of probabilities, this is the most likely cause. And cause is always critical because insurers put mold as one of the exclusion items. So unless it is caused by an event that is covered by the policy, it would otherwise be excluded. So causation is quite critical. Um, so in one of the cases that I was recently working on, we are looking at mold occurring on the ceiling of apartments, and it is such that the apartments are stacked backwards, where the balcony is sitting over a habitable area, and the next habitable area is under another balcony. It's kind of what we call the wedding cake design. This is a consequence, or sometimes it could be a planning requirement in terms of overshading and to prevent from a building looking overly bulky. So they stack the facade backwards each time you go up the floors. Um, the uh, the issues we're dealing with is that we had to determine whether it was a faulty waterproofing membrane on that balcony that caused um, the mold on the underside. But from the leak detection testing, there was no leaks. They couldn't detect a leak. So I felt that the alternative hypothesis, if we couldn't determine the leak, would be to look at the possibility of condensation. And when I looked at that, there was good reason for that to be the case. So there are a few things. That particular balcony was facing southeast, and on the eastern side there was a very tall building that created overshadowing. So those balconies would get very little sun through the day. At night, it's open to the night sky. It gets cold. In the daytime, it is shaded. It doesn't warm up. So it gets cold and it stays cold. Warm air from the internal space would meet there, and it was observed that there was no insulation, no ceiling insulation. So warm air, once it hits the slab, would start condensing.
So these were concrete balconies.
Concrete balconies, yes. And there was that much moisture that there were stalactites. There was not just efflorescence, there were stalactites. The assumption was actually originally that it was water leakage, but we were not able to replicate a leak, the water leak. And so the alternative hypothesis that I was putting forward was that it was condensation as a result of the balcony being cold. And here's the other thing that we're not talking to enough with the people in the waterproofing space. Um, the the external waterproofing is covered by a standard called AS4654. There is no provision inside there for vapor permeable membranes. So you're putting a vapor barrier as a waterproofing membrane on the top of what is the equivalent of a concrete roof. If you've got vapor drive from inside, low vapor on the outside, trying to push upwards, you hit the waterproofing membrane, it cannot escape, it starts accumulating within the slab gets saturated, and you start getting the efflorescence. Efflorescence leave it long enough, becomes a stalactites.
So vapor will go through a concrete slab?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Vapor can easily go through that. Even sewage smells can go through concrete. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So, vapor. Generally,
Straight through.
The pores would. Yeah. The vapor goes.
So this is interesting because I was having a conversation with Clarence McAllister recently. His episode was released just on Monday, and he was saying that balconies over habitable space is actually roofs, and they're not treated as such.
That is a weakness in our code. Yes, it should be treated as such. It should be treated as a roof. We're not doing that because if it's treated as a roof, then the provisions are quite clear. We would apply AS 3500. I think it's part 3. And
I love how you guys can just rattle off standards.
it's yeah. And then in terms of the pitch, in terms of the water collection, the size of the downpipes, everything is covered. But in this case, as a balcony is a no man's land, so you kind of can do whatever you want. So doing forensic work is really interesting in that sense. And we look at a variety of the different issues. Does climate change come into it? Not very immediately in the time periods that I'm looking at. Um, uh, I was looking, for example, at Brisbane's climate data and looking at, for example, the heating degree days and the cooling degree days, and there looks like there is a bit of a trend there. Not enough for me to be conclusive about it, but the trend that it has would tell me that what we have in the weather files that we're using for the simulation was out of date from the start, and it is more and more out of date over the years.
So simulations, you mean NatHERS, WFI?
Exactly. Yes.
Yep.
So the energy simulations are incorrect, and they will be increasingly incorrect. I don't think we are actually dealing with these things with any degree of awareness or intelligence. So we're going to be picking up these pieces for a very long time. Yeah.
I think the WFI weather files with WFI 7.1, there's a whole new bunch of weather files that have been released, and I think they've included some updated rain data. Do you think that closes the gap a little bit?
Yeah. What perturbed me slightly was that in NCC 2019, there was a verification method using hydrothermal analysis that required weather data and rain data. WFI at the time didn't have it.
No.
So it's up to anybody to create a weather file and do the simulation. You would have no idea of tracking it. It's not like NatHERS, where the files are provided and locked. You can't change the weather files. That's the way it has to be. We were allowing verification methods without having the inputs. We had no weather inputs. We had no material inputs. So what are we simulating? So the verification method for the longest time, and I think even up to now, still can be hugely manipulated. And the building surveyor who is going to approve that is not going to be any the wiser.
No, they won't know. And that's the thing, isn't it? Even with energy efficiency assessments, the surveyor, you mentioned the surveyor before when we're talking about BBA and the BPC, and the building surveyor being the one who holds the ultimate say. But the building surveyor has to know everything in order to have the ultimate say, and they simply can't know everything. And I remember with our energy efficiency assessments, it was well understood that once the surveyor received our report, they didn't necessarily understand how to read it. They would just look at the company who provided it and go, oh yeah, I trust them, and that was that.
We currently don't have anything similar for hydrothermal simulation.
No.
We don't have an accredited course. We don't have people who are licensed to run it. And at the end of the day, if you get a mould index less than 3, who knows? It's like
it's very dependent on rubbish in, rubbish out, interpretation, and workmanship as well. So there are lots of variables. It's a risk assessment only. It can only ever be seen as a risk assessment based on exactly what goes into the software.
That's it. Yeah. And with regards to the rain data, I tried working with rain data, and it is not quite as straightforward as it sounds. So D07-160 requires the simulation to assume that 1% of the water that hits the wall reaches the water resistive barrier. How do we create all this, what we call RMIs, reference meteorological years? We look at averages. We look at the average January over, let's say I've got 20 years of record. The average January might be last year. The average February might be 1990. Average March could be in 2010, for example. And then you try to link them all together. What happens if your average month has had a flood event? You get something like a cyclone going through. I don't know, whatever. But you have, let's say for argument's sake, 2 meters of water in 1 week. Do you assume that 1% of that reaches your water resistive barrier? Because once you do that, you can forget about a hydrothermal simulation. Everything is more index 3.
Or, or more.
Yeah. So we don't have a test method to define how much is that film thickness.
Mm.
It is a vertical surface. Obviously, some water is going to be running off. You cannot assume it keeps accumulating there. But we don't have a test standard. We don't have a test standard. We can forget about having any inputs upon what that film thickness is.
Mm.
So look here.
Do you mean the film thickness as in where that 1% of water lies? Is that where it's accumulating? So what Tim's talking about is in a WWOOFy assessment, a hygrothermal assessment, when we build up it's a 2D assessment, or we build up the wall layers in the software, and then the software allows us to put 1% of driving rain into the very outside, the layer of material inside the weather resistive barrier, and that that is put there in order to wet the materials and see if they dry. Basically, it's like throwing water at it. What happens? Does it go moldy or does it dry out? So that's what Tim's talking about now. And I mean, there is no catch-all assessment. We can't assess for cyclones or floods, or we just have to assess for, as you say, averages. That's all we can do.
Yeah, but averages are temperature averages, not rainfall averages.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you pick a year for your temperature average that had a rainfall extreme,
I see what you're saying. So it's actually recorded data. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's right, because we are working off an energy simulation climate file and adding to that another column for rain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we have not actually checked whether that is a proper average.
Okay. Just working with what we've got, I guess.
Yep.
So the weather files in Europe, for example, we've got our own Australian weather files. WWOOFy has been used for longer in Germany, would you say, than we've used it here?
Well, it was written by Germans.
Yeah. It started there, right?
Yeah.
So we've started using it here in the last 5 years or so, 4 years, less than. Well, in terms of building code simulations and compliance. Would you say that the weather files in Europe are more usable because they've had longer to develop them?
Or
maybe. You don't know, or you're not sure.
Yeah, the tendency is that if you have used weather files for a long time, any anomalous trends would show up. So with a new data set, you've got to give it time and for people to be familiar with it. Yeah, like for the case, I was looking at the NatHERS climate files for Brisbane. I was only aware of it because people from there were telling me that they don't like the simulation because it tends to require a lot more insulation than they think they need. And when I looked at it, I found that was true.
Is this for star ratings?
For the NatHERS star ratings, yeah.
Interesting.
That the weather file in the climate file was for a much cooler climate than it was for Brisbane.
Yeah, right.
Because the climate zone was quite big for that, and it went through different areas. So yes, if weather files have got problems, we don't see it until much later. Another case was that when I was looking at something in Tasmania, only because I could compare against another forensic case I was doing, I found that there was perfect symmetry on the east and west side, and when I looked at it, it was a sine wave that was flipped around. So you basically have got east and west having exactly the same kind of solar patterns.
A sine wave?
As in that, when you get
is that a maths thing?
The sun angles.
Oh, the sun.
As your sun moves around, the amount of radiation you get is known as a cosine rule based on the angle of the sun. So what was done was that the radiation was synthesized. It wasn't recorded. And that's why I had perfect symmetry across the east and west side.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, because the hygrothermal simulation gave me exactly the same result for east and west. I thought something was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So the system is flawed.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to work as much as I can with hygrothermal simulation, but I think it's not ready yet. I actually think it's not ready. Yeah.
Okay. So, what's giving you hope? What's giving you hope? What's new? Is there new technology or anything emerging that you can see that's making you think, yes, we're going to get there?
I'm thankful that there are enough pathological optimist around. I don't know whether that's a nice term, but I mean, people like you give me hope, Jess. I mean, it's like you swim against the tide. You never think anything is too hard. You think that we need a podcast, I'm doing it. It's like
That's basically what happened.
it's like yeah, that yeah, it's things like that give me hope that that not everybody is sitting back and watching the world implode. Not everybody is trying to just do a bad job and run away from it. Yeah, I think there is a certain drive amongst Australians that that doing the right thing is good enough, and I think I mean, it's not everyone that's that way, but there's enough around for me to think that, yeah, it's shouldn't give up hope yet. There are people who
Not
are
at all.
interested, and the other thing that I find really interesting is that it's a bit like how fireflies, they only put out their light when it's dark enough, and that's how they find each other. It's
Yeah.
only when things really get bad that we start noticing that, hey, I can find my tribe amongst these other people who are actually getting more public because they're just as annoyed as I am about matters. So yes, I used to be a pacifist. I try not to get into an argument, but hey, those days are over. I've thrown off the gloves. I get into a fight now. I get dirty because I just think that's too much nonsense around it. You just got to call it out.
Yeah. Good on you. And there's so many of us. I mean, you work in the restoration space, so maybe it's a little bit harder for you to feel positive. But I work in the space that we're designing solutions. We're not fixing problems.
Yeah.
So we're trying to prevent problems, and there are so many of us all beating the same drum.
Yeah.
And those people give me hope too, and I'm so pleased to be one of them and part of it. So
that is so awesome, Jess.
Yeah. Cool. Last question. I asked this of all of my guests on this podcast. What is the one thing out of everything that you've learned in your career that you want the listener to know, if you could choose one thing?
In all my career, I've always loved science, and I probably would send this message to those who feel that science is a very unlovely thing. It's that you just haven't met the right teacher yet. Don't give up on it.
Yeah. I love that. That's good. Thank you so much, Tim. This has been a really fabulous, interesting and educational and really enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Jess. I had a lot of fun too.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
No
I'll
worries.
talk to you soon.
Okay then. Take care.
Okay, bye.
That is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. There will be another episode in a fortnight, so if you would like to listen into the types of conversations that I have all the time, please subscribe on your chosen platform. Rate the show, leave a comment, whatever you like, share with your friends and family. I'd love for you to spread the word about the Building Sciology Poddie. There's a link in the episode description where you can head to a landing page, and there are some show notes there with relevant links and a full transcript of the show as well, and also links to my socials. So if you're not already, I'd love for you to follow along there too, as I share lots of building science and building biology tips. Thanks again. I'll be back in 2 weeks, so until then, happy healthy building.